give floor to, okay. Before I give floor to Lillian, there is one formal question and one announcement how we are going to work. We would like to record this meeting and later on to have it on our YouTube channel. So those of you who are not okay with recording, you can keep your camera switched off. But on the other hand, we would like to have this meeting like dialogue way or more interactive way. So Lillian will start with some of my questions, but then I would like you also to participate. So if you have some question or comment, please give a sign with raising hand so I can see you that you would like to say something, and I would like to facilitate this meeting for 1 hour such a way that it's actually discussion, not just the lecture. Is it okay with everybody? I cannot see any protest, so my outcome out of this is that yes, we can start. So Lillian, please tell us something about how is the situation of human rights, NGOs and civil society in Norway today, and especially what kind of problems are you facing? Because we in Slovakia, we usually think about the Nordic countries as perfect countries where there is democracy and human rights and everything is perfect. So please tell us, is it really like this?
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for the invitation to attend here. I have prepared some thoughts, but I'm also delighted of this opportunity to have a dialogue. So I will try not to, hold a lecture, but I hope you will have some questions. And thank you for partnering up in this very exciting project. It's right. I have been working with human rights education and education for democratic citizenship, intercultural education for at least 25 years, actually. So I have some quite experience also from Russia and 15 European countries, but we have been working a lot in Norway for minority groups, especially, but also for teachers, etc. The Human Rights Academy, which I am the director for, works just with human rights education, education in democratic citizenship, intercultural understanding, and our specialty is the participatory methods. So this is the way we work. Mm-hmm. In the project that we have had, I have written an article about the Norwegian civil society, and then I had to go a little bit back in history to learn about to try to see the Norwegian civil society today in a more historic perspective, and this was very, very interesting. And of course, the Norwegian society has problems when it comes to civil society, other societal problems, but I'm not sure if I will say that there are any very big major problems. I think in general, compared to other countries, the situation is quite good. We have strong civil society tradition. We have strong traditions for popular movement, taking part in the democratic development of the Norwegian society. So in a way, the Norwegian democracy today is created bottom up. It's really the people itself that created organizations, political parties, and developed a strong culture for civil society. And it has also to do with the fact that Norway didn't have any big, powerful nobility. We were quite independent people, and we didn't have to ask ask anyone with big power before we could do something. And this has we taken with us also today. So today there are more than 150,000 NGOs working in different areas, and with a population of 5.5 million people, it's quite a lot. And in fact, myself, and together with two other ladies, created the Human Rights Academy. Mm-hmm. We had the courage to do so. And also, like the other Nordic countries, Norway has a higher level of social and political trust. And this goes together with the broad and living civil society. And also research shows that societies with high level of political and social trust, they have also better economic development. So the situation is quite good, but of course there are challenges, and the civil society are working with the challenges. And I think one major challenge in Norway, as in many other countries today, is challenges with discrimination. We have had we have a long history of discrimination, actually, because we have the Sami population, Jews, Roma, that have been subjected to state discrimination all through Norwegian history, in fact, up to 30 years from now. But the last 30, 40 years, we have had much migration from other countries, from Asia, from Africa. And we have had refugees from war. And now many are also coming from Ukraine. And we have also have many, especially from Poland and Lithuania, that are coming as migrants that want to work. So we have problems with discrimination, also from the majority that have, it had taken time for the majority to adapt to the minority and to learn about culture, to be aware of the mechanisms, the social psychological mechanisms that happens when, foreign people come. So today we have no state discrimination anymore, but the laws are very good, quite good, but there are still structural racism and racism among people. Mm-hmm. If you have a foreign name, you can have problems in renting a flat. You can have problems in getting interview on jobs. And sometimes we hear stories often in the media that some people have not come into the bars in the night, for example. Mm-hmm. And we know also that young people, pupils, face discrimination in school, ethnic discrimination, racism, mm-hmm. Islamophobia, anti-Semitism, etc. And we have hate speech also. And now we just celebrated the Constitution Day, the 17th of May. And one of my acquaintances, a young woman with Somali background, said that in the demonstrations with the children and with the flags, she just heard that, hey, get off, get away from here, because she had the darker skin. So she posted this on Facebook. So these are things happening in Norway. Mm-hmm. Yes, and I can also tell, because I checked up a little bit, I can just tell that Statistics Norway have asked people about if they feel they have been discriminated. Is there subjective feeling of discrimination? And 1 of 5 say they have been discriminated against the last year. And most people who feel this is on background of illness, sex or age. more women than men say they have experienced discrimination. 25% of women, 19% of men. Younger generation feel more discriminated than the older. And 25% of immigrants feel discriminated because of their ethnic background. 12% say it's because of color of the skin, and 7% of religion.
Can I ask, is it a good thing or the bad thing? Because we can interpret it also that way, that people are more aware about what does it mean to be discriminated. So that's why there is like, there are answers that, yes, I feel discriminated, because a couple of years ago, maybe the awareness would be much lower. And people would say, okay, this is how it is. It is not discrimination. It is just life. So it's interesting. How do you interpret these numbers?
I agree with you. I think that because of the education system, because of the more awareness about discrimination, human rights abuses, etc., people can feel maybe be a little bit more sensitive. They know that these things are existing in society. But of course, I also believe that this reflects the reality in some way or another. But I think also it's interesting, because when we are dealing with statistics, we are very often focusing on the negative results. But if we focus on the positive side, one can say that 70% of the women are not felt discriminated, 80% of the men are not discriminated, etc. And but what is also interesting is that in the population at large, only 1% say they have been discriminated on the background of sexual identity. But what the finding is also that persons with non-heterosexual orientation is among the groups that have the lowest life quality, and they feel less satisfied with life. So 11% say they have been discriminated on the background of sexual identity, but again, 89% not. And 16% of the gay lesbians say they have been discriminated, but again, 84 not.
84, those who have like different sexual identity from the majority, right?
Yeah, this is the gay lesbian, the homosexual.
I see.
And 84% have not feel discriminated the last year. This is for the last year.
Yeah, and that's interesting.
I think the Norwegian, when I am abroad, and I have been much abroad, I've been much to Russia, the Norwegian society has become a more liberal society the last 30 years. I can see it very clearly in my lifetime. And what we find is also like religious people, they have also become more liberal. So the Norwegian society as such have become more liberal. And so I believe that there is more consciousness, and there is more this majority of people that also protect the minorities. So it's not politically correct to be a racist or discriminate people in Norway. If you discriminate people, you are really hearing it from the majority. Hey, stop, don't do this.
I see. So you feel like this is something which is rooted in the culture, is not just that, okay, this is the law and we have to pretend we respect it, but is it really something what is in the society, right? But
I believe so. At
the same time, you are expert also on narratives and stories and teaching human rights, not just the way through the law, as far as I understood when I Googled your various articles and work. That and this is interesting for me because also I know, and we have one good friend from Norway who is former neo-Nazi member, and now he's working for the police prevention of radicalization. So there is also in your country this neo-Nazi movement and this kind of radicalization of particular groups of society. And this is, now I want to come to the core of the topic of this webinar, that sometimes in Slovakia here, we feel that when people speak about human rights, they think it's something like, it's something external, it's something that maybe European Union imposed to us, and that we are dealing with only the problems of minorities, whatever they would be classified by. And normal people, the good people, the general people, the fellow citizens, they are not protected by any kind of whatever human rights. So they feel that this is something actually not genuine or not okay for the people. So how would you maybe address this, or maybe how the human rights education is phrased in your country, so that people who are white, Norwegian, original people living in there, so they don't feel like, okay, you are dealing with all these colorful people only, or strange people, or whatever gender different people, and we normal people, where are we in this picture?
I hope you hear me. There is something happening outside in the...
It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Well, I want to use our own experiences as the Human Rights Academy, how we used to do it. And also, of course, now pupils in the Norwegian schools have to learn about human rights. It's a mandatory subject which everyone has to learn about. And when we are teaching about human rights, we in fact we go a little bit back in history. We go back to the Second World War. We go back to the anarchic situation that, in fact, resulted in the war, and more than 55,000 killed people. And we go back there. We start there as a starting point for the international human rights, modern international human rights system. And we start with how the different states negotiated the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Mm-hmm. And then we use quite a lot of time on that, on which issues was on the agenda. And it took 2 years for the Human Rights Commission to negotiate the 30 articles in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And it was very hard and interesting, but tense debates, because the states had different religions, cultures, histories, backgrounds, cultures. So in the end, the Universal Declaration became the regulations and the values that all could agree upon. But it was not at that point juridical binding regulations. It was just a declaration. So then we must continue some more years, 18 more years, before the human rights became actual human rights conventions, which are legally binding for the states.
Yes, but some countries, they signed the declaration, they signed the all various conventions, and okay, we don't have to name only Russia, but there are many countries, including our own, which is violating very often this international laws. So and people just, they don't care very much about the international laws. I mean, I was really fascinated by when I was learning about, you have in Norway this strong feeling of equality. And you were mentioning that yes, that you did not have very big differences between nobility and like general citizens, and that still Norwegian people have a strong feeling for equality. And maybe this is something you can use in interpreting it, but here is different. And when you know the situation in other post-communist countries, you can imagine that in every country it is different. So how to make the state not just sign the declaration, but really people believe that it is something for them, that this is something good.
Yeah. But I want again to insist on how important it is to go to teach about the international human rights system, because when the international community adopt international human rights conventions, they ask the states whether they want to ratify them or not. And if they ratify them, which many of the European states have done, almost all of them have ratified so many, they must go back and change their own national laws. And this is the key point, because the international human rights are not international human rights, they are national human rights. They are national human rights in Slovakia, there are national human rights in Norway. And this is empowering for us as citizens to know. They empower the pupils at school, because they know that the Slovakian state has some obligations. They have ratified human rights conventions. It's a part of the law in Slovakia, and it's a part of the Norwegian law. And this is very important for the Slovaki population to know, as equally in Norway. It's very important that people are aware of this, because only then we can criticize our government when they are violating human rights. And then we can use the media to say that, hey, ask that minister or why he's violating the human rights. So this is, in general, we feel that there is too little knowledge about the international human rights system and how it affects the national legal systems. And this is very, very important. And when we have courses, this is one of our main points, because the international human rights is not something that is happening up there. It's our own legal system.
Yeah, but do people in Norway believe that it's really helping them? I mean, general population, not intellectuals, not NGO people, but normal people who have normal lives. Do they really believe that human rights is something what is useful for them?
I believe so.
And why? So. What is the reason? I don't think it's because of some international laws. So what is the reason a person with secondary education living in the village near Oslo can trust that really human rights is something useful for me?
Well, because also it's a part, as I told you, it's a part of the Norwegian legal system today, and it's being used in court cases when people, for example, have been discriminated in a bar and go to court. The court and the judge are showing to the human rights and to the human rights law we have here in Norway, and they say that hey, this is a violation of human rights. So this is being referred to every time we see very high discrimination and in the court cases. But then again, we have also human rights education in schools, even in the kindergarten. The children are learning about the Convention on the Rights of the Child.
That's interesting.
It's a concept that is familiar to them. But sometimes I agree that what we also teach is that sometimes the international human rights is not only my rights, because we can see that I have the rights. And, pupils in the school can say, I have this right. You have to listen to me because I have this right. But what we teach is that, okay, when you have the right, you must also respect other people's rights. So this is why the international human rights also creates solidarity in a society. So I think this is very important point. The international human rights are not egoistic values, but they are values to create solidarity among people, because we need to respect each other's human rights.
You know, what is the problem maybe in Slovakia, that we also have like civic education or human rights education at schools, but very often it is, you know, very mechanical, that pupils are asked to learn constitution by heart, and there is no real discussion about the essence of rights. I mean, they are just memorizing some facts, some dates, some, you know, titles of the international institutions. And then it also creates this kind of resistance, that it is something like, again, something I have to learn, I have to, you know, pass an exam on, and it's like counterproductive. So I'm interested in how, for example, you can teach the human rights different ways, so that children are interested in that. I mean, here in this group, even, you know, in this meeting, there are people who are doing a great job in teaching or training human rights, and they do it very great way. But now I'm talking about the system, about the official, you know, official school system. So how it is in Norway?
Again, I think you have a very important point here, that sometimes human rights are being taught in a very theoretical way. And this is not our way. That is why we specialize in participatory methods. All the time, participatory methods, because we want it to come from the pupils themselves, the children themselves. And I can very, very shortly give an example. Before, when we are in the asylum centers, for example, we have many courses at asylum centers for young asylum seekers from 16 to 18 years old. And for example, from Afghanistan, Syria, well, many places. And before we even mention the word human rights, they are doing a group work. And we say to them that in your group, you have to imagine that the world has been through the Third World War, climate disasters, you cannot live here anymore. But as the only ones, you have got hold of a rocket that is going to another planet. And this planet resembles Earth, how it used to be. But there are no people there. But they know it will come many people to this planet. But since they are the first, they have the privilege of making some rules on how to regulate, how to organize the society on this new planet, so that people shall live and that they shall live good lives. So this is the question we ask them. So they get half an hour on finding 10 rules, and they can also name the planet, you know. And this is very interesting, because what we see, the results are, we have many, you know, like these posters with beautiful rules, and the rules are, for example, respect, equality, no forced marriages. We see they are taking the problems in their own culture and they don't want it. No forced marriages. Some can say no war, no weapon. We must cooperate. We must build houses. If somebody is sick, they need to go to the hospital. We must build hospitals, etc. So in fact, we have got so many beautiful planets that we have made a beautiful exhibition that now is touring southern Norway for the 5th year on a row. But this is how we engage the youngsters to think themselves that there are, that maybe, and sometimes they can ask, oh, Lillian, it's so difficult this. And then I ask, but maybe we don't need any rules. If there are 10,000 people or 1 million people, then you don't maybe need any rules. Yes, we need to have some rules, you know? So, but the point is, after this group work, after they have presented their very good rules, and they also say, we need police, we need to have some sort of conflict resolution mechanisms, you know. And then afterwards we say that, you know, what you just did was what the international community did after there was this big disaster on our planet, you know, the Second World War. And afterwards they sat together for 2 years trying to find out some rules, some values that should be present in all societies, namely the international human rights. And then so this is the way we are working, and then they immediately understand the main point of what the human rights is all about, is to creating some good societies to live in, where people can be free and they can, you know, live good lives. So yes. this is why we insist on using participatory methods, and we can see also that in Norwegian schools, this New Planet exercise we have also taught teachers, so it's been used in the Norwegian schools, and they are focusing more and more on participatory methods, good methods.
Yes, one thing which is also interesting for me is that, you know, you probably somehow link the traditions in Norway, your history, as you were mentioning at the beginning, that when you were preparing the article about civil society in Norway, you had to a little bit research in the history, but also when thinking about human rights, that it is always good to attach the values of human rights or to somehow relate it to some traditions, some historical events which are national, which are like on this territory it happened, and we can refer on this as our how to say that we really like went through this process of fighting for freedom, or, you know, standing against oppression, or, you know, trying to really show solidarity or other values in the society. So what kind of Norwegian tradition you refer to when you teach about human rights in Norway, Norwegian people? What is important event, or what are important historical traditional values you refer to?
Well, I think the you know, the historical more the equality, you know, the independent peasant, fisherman, no novelty that, you know, has been created the Norwegian society.
We do have 2 wheelchairs in the Jedford.
The democracy that have been built from bottom up, you know, the political parties that was, you know, peasant parties, working parties, the big movement, the women's movement in Norway. But I think also we were occupied for 5 years by the Nazis, and this is, of course, we were also fighting for freedom. But then again, I think also that we must be aware of the human rights violations that have happened, that the state has been responsible for, that has been very, very serious and terrible violations, and where the kids were taken from the parents, sterilization even of some minorities, and the Jews. So we have our share of state discrimination and very serious discrimination of minority groups. But then the government has excused itself for it. The king have excused itself for it. But now, in fact, I think this year we have this reconciliation commission where this is being dealt with. There will become a report, reconciliation report, which again will shed light on what the Norwegian state did to their minorities, the Sami population and others, and to see how we can repair the wounds that is still there, because we know the wounds are still there. So, but I think also we have this quite active state that is focusing on these issues. They see, okay, there has this problem there, and of course this active state is also a consequence of the civil society movement. You know, the Sami organizations, the Organization for Jurists, the anti-Semitic, and the research, and so there are. So I think this is also very, very, very important, and not the least. And I was coming to that. We have had especially 2 or 3 very serious terrorist attacks in the country. And it is because of it can be connected to the more diverse society, the more multicultural society. So we have had problems with, you know, like right-wing terrorism, anti-Islamic things. So in the 22nd of July 2011, we had a very, very serious terrorist attack in Oslo and at Utøya, where the Labour Party youth camp were attacked by one terrorist, and 77 persons were killed, and many more wounded. And it was, you have heard about this. And this
we heard very much, of course.
But this event shocked the Norwegian society, because we were thinking maybe that we were this innocent safe haven, but we were not. But this also created pressure for the educational government and for the government as such to focus more on human rights education, educations for active citizenship, anti-discrimination, anti-racism, etc. So in fact, in 2020, we now have this democracy and citizenship as one of 3 main cross-cultural subjects that everyone has to learn about in Norwegian schools. So, and also last year in June, we had a terrorist attack again in Oslo. It was the evening before Pride celebration, so it was connected to that, and 2 people were killed, and the whole population again was very shocked. Did it happen again?
Yeah.
So it shows us that we need to constantly deal with this, and we need to constantly tackle our diversities and need how to learn as a, you know, stable, peaceful, democratic society. But it's not coming by itself. We have to really work for it.
I see. I would now like to encourage the participants, please, if you like to comment or ask something, so that is not only me asking Lillian. So please raise your hand or give me any sign that you would like to speak. And yeah.
Hi, can I ask something?
Yes, Dominika. Please,
Hi, nice to meet you.
Can you switch on the camera so that
Oh,
we
yes,
can
just a
look.
second. I hope it will work. Oh, now I can
Yes,
see it.
wonderful.
Hi, nice to meet you. I am from Human Rights Institute, and I got a question. We have now a project called Gender Equality Promotion, and we do this workshop on schools with students around 16, 17, 18. And they're like really nice, really like accept a lot of things, even in some like minority groups region, but they usually ask me one question, which never came to my mind, like how they should like describe this gender equality to older generations, because we all the time talk about like younger generation, how to explain this problem to them or something like this, but how we should approach older generations, because I think in Slovakia it's much more of the issue, like older generation to accept these new things. So sometimes I just reply like some dialogue or something like this, but it's not all the time working. Like, what is maybe your suggestion to this topic?
Wonderful. Thank you. That's very important question, Dominika.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for the very interesting question. I think you had the keyword already, dialogue, but I will not be so boring to just, to phrase you on that. But what we can see in Norway is a little bit of the same. We can see that the older generation can be more conservative. We can see that some more isolated religious community and some migrant, more traditional patriarchic communities can have this problem on accepting gender equality. And we don't have any quick fix on this. But what we do is that, as also this small chat of ours have shown, is that human rights is not very easy to grasp in 1 hour. We need to use a little bit of time. What we have been doing the last 3 or 4 years is using timelines and using and teaching about culture. What is culture? This is a good angle. And what is traditional values? What is traditional values? It's about culture, isn't it? And then we ask, what is culture? And then they come up with a lot of things when we have courses. And then we often say that culture is both what we call the codes in the back of our heads that we just take with us wherever we go. We say hello in Norway, we say hello with shaking hands. In France, you do. This makes me Norwegian. This makes a French, a little bit different because we have different cultures. And these codes in the back of our heads are quite strong. And we often love our culture because this is where we have, loved and been taken care of. We have seen the flowers grow, etc. So all people often love their culture. So when we meet something that is different, we can be a little bit, we can be cultural slow in accepting and understanding things that we haven't seen before or heard about before. So we are, and then when we have these workshops, I often refer to my son, who was 11 years old when he came back home and did like this. When he got his friend knocking on the door and he met them and he said, hello. And then he did like this, high five. They didn't shake hands with hands, but they give me 5. So I stopped and I thought, okay, this is culture is changing. The way the young people are greeting each other is changing. It's not what I used to be. So this is a very good example very concrete example on how culture are changing. So then the conclusion after this brainstorming is that culture is both the codes, quite often conservative codes in our heads, but at the same time, cultures are constantly developing. And when we are working with timelines, for example, when it comes to women's rights or children's rights or rights for disabled or rights for sexual minorities, we see that, 100 years ago or, even more, there were a lot of discrimination. There was a lot of, invisibleness. But then the society has been changed. Some activists have come forward. Hey, look at me, I'm like you, And then we have seen society is changing slowly. The legal system has changed slowly. And when we have this group work on, they do this for, again, participatory methods. They are getting 20 pictures, which they are to put in a timeline. So then they can see for themselves, hey, these 20 pictures there in Norway for 200 years ago, it's very different from how it is now. And then so this is, if you have time, working with the older generation, use timelines, because they also remember. Mm-hmm. So, but I think for this, and of course, research, statistics, using the media, the civil society have to come to discuss all these issues, talk about it, and think about it, and learn from each other. So, but these timelines are very, very good as evidence of that societies are developing very, very often in a positive manner, because often we focus on what is negative all the time, negative. Everything is terrible. It's very important, especially also for young people, to focus on what is positive. What are the positive things that have happened the last 100 years or 50 years or even 20 years? Because then they can be empowered to do something themselves to change what they don't like.
Yeah, I think that's a great framing, Lillian. I would add only to this that very often human rights are framed through war or discrimination or very like war crimes. But if we take a history of, for example, access to water or medical care or vaccination or, things that are very easy to imagine by everybody, regardless education or social status, that may help a lot. That how it was during the Second World War, or in the last half of 20th century, which many people still remember, and compare this situation to what we have now, and to concentrate on not only some imaginative tradition, which is sometimes just created and is not real, but a real comparison of well-being or social situation of people.
I totally agree, and we do that, especially with young people. You mentioned, like the living age has doubled on average in the world the last 200 years. It's doubled. And children attending school today, they attend school. More than 90% of the young girls and boys attend school. It's not quality education everywhere, but still they are working on it. We know about it, and we must work about it. And female genital circumcision, for example, another, like human rights violation, another traditional custom that is really terrible. It's focusing on and working working on it. And so there are so many things that that we can use as positive references. And I think this is very, very important. And, you know, I teach human rights because I really believe in it and because I can see it. But we need to have the historic perspective. It's very, very important, or else it becomes some ideals, some fantastic values up here that we cannot find in our communities.
Perfect. Lillian, there is another question. Thank you, Dominika. And Martin Kovac, please, if you can switch on your camera. Thank you.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, I was listening to you and thank you for your nice presentation. I spent a semester during my PhD studies in Oslo, so I also know about the Norwegian system. And like the first lecture at the Faculty of Theology where I studied was keen on the influence of the 22nd of July on the theology of Norway. So it was possible to see like the reflection of all the parts of society on these terrorist attacks and on the human rights. This was the theological faculty at the university. But my question is maybe like when I was in Norway, I've seen that the government and the churches and the whole general society is like working on all of this topic like in collaboration. But what I feel here in Slovakia nowadays is that also some important people in the government and even in the Christian churches, like they are more in opposition towards the human rights, and especially nowadays when we speak about the LGBTIQ plus rights, and we have very strong anti-gender discourse now in Slovakia. How to work as the human rights organization in such context where you do not have this type of collaboration. And one more very short reflection. I spent like 2 weeks ago, I was on a study trip in the Netherlands. And what I've seen there, we were there like human rights activists from Slovakia, Poland, and Hungary. And also many of us were speaking about like the Western values and European values and so on. And, you know, I had in my mind that we should talk more about our values, that it's not about some Western, we are the West, and Western values are our values. And this is especially important that we are taking the narratives of this anti-European, anti-Western movements here, of far right, and we are using their terminology. And I see this as a challenge for us. Thank you very much.
You know, thank you, Martin. I especially liked your last point, because I agree totally. What is the West? The West is very different. There are so many, you know, so many countries. And that is why also for us, it's important when we have our courses to underline the global aspect of the international human rights. And we have the United Nations, that is the global organization, but we also have human rights systems developing in Africa. You have the African Charter, you have the Maputo Protocol, which is the Human Rights Convention on women's rights. So you have the Arabic world also working on human rights instruments, and also the Americas have their human rights instruments. So I think this is very important. The international human rights is not only, you know, like Western values, they are global values. And the different, you know, cultures, region, continents are, they also embrace the international human rights and make them their own, because they need it, because people want freedom. So I totally agree with you, and I'm thinking about it many times. So thank you for this, for that comment. I think in Norway we have also had, of course, conservative religious leaders and politicians that have been very, you know, like anti LGBT plus representatives, but also inside the communities, inside the religious communities, there has been working for a long time by the sexual minorities themselves, and we have had these open churches, etc. So this is also that, you know, that has been discussed and pointed out, and actually last year in February, I think, we had the bishops meeting, the highest authority from the Norwegian church, that said in a statement that we are sorry for the stand that the Norwegian church has taken against the sexual minorities in the former Norwegian history. We will again underline the human dignity for all, and that we are an open church, etc. So this when we have courses for example, minority communities, religious communities, we use this as an example.
Mhm.
So I think just as an inspiration, but I think I know it's hard work, but I think also as NGOs, we must be committed to be in the forefront, to take these fights. We need to stand there, we need to be firm, and we need to be aware of the values and just, stand there. But it can be hard. It can be hard sometimes, but
at the same time, what I hear in your speech is that sometimes you cannot push too much, because some groups of the population, they need their time, or they need different narrative to understand that it's not something against them, or the change is not just to the worse. And that sometimes what you were saying with Dominika, the dialogue is the way how to discuss this, because sometimes this anxiety of too much changing at the same time may really lead to some affiliation to some neo-Nazi thinking, or some whatever what would be called that this is something what was this beautiful past, right? Which has never been really, but sometimes some political actors, they are creating artificial past, like this glorious past where all people, especially those who were in power at that time, were happy. And sometimes when you push too hard, then this fires back, and then you have this terrorist action. So this is also something what is interesting for me, how to be with this.
Yeah, I agree with you, and this is very interesting when we are working with minority groups in Norway, because we can also feel the sort of conservative sentiments connected with religion, etc., but also in other places, of course, in Norway. So. But it is dialogue, and but also the questions we ask. We must talk with, and not only to. So
Wonderful.
we need to ask questions. We need to what is culture for you? Can you yourself in your lifetime, can you see that your culture have changed? Come up with some examples, and then they are a part of a dialogue, and then this is the starting point that we often we must have a good dialogue. We must create an atmosphere of respect, and then eventually we can come up with some conclusions. And it's not me that is coming up with the conclusion, it's the group itself, it's what we have learned through these discussions we have had, where all have participated. And this is the best way to learn, because then it's anchored in people themselves, and it's not coming from outside. And I think
wonderful.
Yeah, and I think it's also the outsiderness that is a problem with the terrorists. We know that young people that feel outside the community, that they don't belong. They are the persons who are vulnerable and
Yes.
are becoming radicalized. So we need to talk to them. We need to have a dialogue with them. So, and this, I think this is because we are all humans and we must meet each other as human beings. So, and this I think is the key for creating a good development.
This is wonderful. Thank you, Lillian, for these words, because this is something wonderful to end up with. Unless there is some question or comment from the participants, I would still give some seconds for you guys to raise your hand or just directly ask. Anna, thank you very much. And if there are no questions, there is something no. So thank you very much, everybody, for your participation, and thank you, Lillian, for sharing your experience. And we were not very much like, I mean, there was no the strict scenario to this webinar, but just by chance we ended up with the main idea of also we as an organization are promoting that really the dialogue and talking to people and respect them with their fears, with their misunderstanding, or with their not agreeing of what's going on in the society. This is a way how to make it better, how to promote human rights and make our societies better. And thank you very much for your participation, and I hope we will meet again on some other occasion.
Thank you to you. Thank you so much. And thank you to all the participants.
Bye-bye.
Bye.